What if the key to lasting desire isn't in what you share, but in what you choose to keep sacred? What if the deepest respect a man can feel for a woman begins not when she opens all her doors, but when she leaves just one gently closed? There is a subtle but immense difference between connection and exposure. Many women, especially those who have been taught that love means full transparency, confuse emotional honesty with total self-disclosure. As if intimacy were a constant unraveling, a never-ending confessional in which nothing must be hidden. But what if that very instinct, rooted in a longing to be fully seen, sometimes dilutes the very essence that ignites desire and sustains respect? Let's be clear, this is not about manipulation. It's about preservation. There is strength in containment. There is power in discretion. And sometimes the parts of you that are held closest, your doubts, your stories, your dreams, are not secrets, but sacred possessions. Not everything needs to be spoken aloud in order to be honored. Some things gain meaning because they are protected. To the woman who has been told she is too much for being emotionally open, and to the woman who was shamed for being cold for not sharing enough, perhaps the truth is not in the extremes, but in the art of selectivity. Psychologically, we are wired to respond to mystery. From a Freudian lens, the human psyche doesn't just seek pleasure, it seeks meaning, and mystery invites meaning. When something is not immediately available, it activates curiosity, interest, even admiration. Think of a wrapped gift. It holds more value before it is opened, because it holds potential. A story untold is not a lie. It is a form of power, especially when that story is yours to give, or not. Sigmund Freud once said, "We are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love." And yet many women interpret this suffering as a consequence of not being transparent enough, instead of recognizing that often they are suffering from overexposure, from giving away their internal life too quickly to someone who has not yet earned it. So here is the invitation. What would it mean to honor your emotional privacy not as a barrier, but as a form of dignity? This chapter is not a lesson in games. It is a return to self-possession. Because the truth is, the woman who withholds out of fear is hiding, but the woman who withholds out of wisdom is protecting. As we move forward, we will explore 5 specific areas where selective sharing is not only psychologically sound, it's deeply empowering. These are not tricks to keep a man hooked. They are boundaries to keep yourself whole. And if you've ever felt that love required you to expose every scar, every story, every weakness, ask yourself this: are you sharing to build a bridge or to prove your worth? Are you connecting or confessing? Because sometimes your silence is not rejection, it's reverence. And that, perhaps, is where feminine energy truly begins. Secret 1. Your deepest insecurities. Have you ever mistaken emotional nakedness for intimacy? Have you ever opened your heart too fast, only to feel a shift, subtle or sharp, in how he looked at you afterward? It begins innocently, a moment of closeness, a deep conversation, the temptation to be real, and suddenly you're unraveling, telling him about your body image fears, your fear of abandonment, how your father left when you were 12, how you sometimes feel unlovable. And you may believe at that moment that this is the foundation of a bond, that by offering your brokenness, you are proving your trust, your honesty, your worth. But here's a difficult truth. Not every person can hold your pain with reverence. And worse, some will use it to diminish you. Psychologically, this confusion often stems from a conditioned belief that love must be earned through vulnerability. Especially for women shaped by abandonment, neglect, or emotional invalidation, sharing insecurities becomes a hidden plea. If I show you my wounds, will you finally love me enough to heal them? This isn't intimacy. It's unconscious bargaining. In behavioral terms, we must understand that oversharing is often reinforced in childhood. Perhaps you learned that caretakers paid attention only when you were hurt, sad, or struggling. So you internalize the idea that emotional exposure equals connection. But in adult relationships, this reinforcement doesn't always translate. Instead of drawing someone closer, it can tip the scale. You become not the woman to be admired, but the woman to be fixed or worse, pitied. This is where the illusion of intimacy deceives, because not all connection is healthy, and not all disclosure creates respect. Sigmund Freud, peering into the architecture of human drives, would say that we unconsciously seek equilibrium, psychic balance. If you give too much of yourself too soon, especially your unhealed parts, you tip that balance. The other person feels a power they didn't earn. And power without responsibility often becomes neglect or control. The woman who retains part of her internal world, who allows herself to process emotions privately before inviting someone in, is not cold. She is cultivated. She chooses connection, not compulsion. She has learned that not every fear deserves a stage. Some deserve a journal, a therapist, a walk in solitude, the mirror. Let me tell you a brief story. A woman in her late 40s, divorced after 2 decades of emotional neglect, begins dating again. On the 3rd date, feeling a deep attraction, she tells the man about her fear of aging, her resentment toward her ex, and how she feels like she's starting from zero. She doesn't hear from him again. Days later, her friend says gently, "You didn't give him a chance to know your power. You only showed him your pain." This isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's about choosing the timing of your truth. Emotional containment doesn't mean suppression, it means sovereignty. You get to decide what parts of your inner world are sacred and when they are safe to share. So I ask you, are you sharing because you feel seen or because you feel insecure? Are you revealing your soul or abandoning your center? As a small practice, try this. Before revealing something deeply vulnerable, ask yourself, is this for mutual connection or is it a cry for reassurance? If it's the latter, pause. Let your own heart hear it first, because the woman who validates herself no longer needs to expose herself to feel worthy. And that is a presence no one forgets. Secret 2. Past romantic experiences. Have you ever caught yourself talking about an ex, not because you wanted to, but because something in you needed to be understood, explained, or even vindicated? And afterward, did you feel a strange hollowness, as if you had given part of your current story away to someone who couldn't yet carry it? There is a quiet trap in discussing past relationships too soon. It disguises itself as honesty, but it often functions as comparison, justification, or unresolved grief in disguise. When you speak about your former partners, especially in the early phases of a new connection, you aren't simply telling stories. You're unconsciously defining the new man through the lens of the old ones. You're shaping expectation through contrast, and you may be inviting dynamics you never intended. From a psychological point of view, this tendency is often rooted in emotional patterning. We seek to make sense of our past by talking about it. And for women shaped by betrayal, abandonment, or emotional inconsistency, there's often a burning desire to explain what happened as a way of earning preemptive empathy. But here's the paradox. The more you try to ensure you won't be hurt again, the more you expose the places where you were broken, and in doing so, you often hand over a blueprint for how to hurt you. A man who hasn't yet proven his emotional maturity doesn't need to know how many people disappointed you. He needs to see how you hold yourself now, despite the disappointment. Freud might say that every repetition of a romantic failure is not a coincidence. It is a repetition compulsion. We unconsciously recreate old wounds, hoping for a different outcome. But dragging old lovers into new beginnings doesn't heal you. It just keeps you orbiting the same psychic wound, hoping someone will love you out of it. And that hope often fails. Instead of focusing on who you were with or what they did, you can focus on what you've learned, on what kind of woman you're becoming now. Let your growth, not your grief, lead the conversation. There is also the danger of inviting comparison. Even the most confident man may feel subtly displaced when you speak of exes, especially if there's an edge of nostalgia or resentment or unfinished story. And once the ghost of another man enters the room, he never quite leaves. He lingers. He shapes the dynamic. He becomes the standard or the shadow. One woman in her 50s shared her dating experiences with a new partner, how her ex was wealthy, charming, but cold, how another was passionate, but unpredictable. She thought she was being transparent, but her current partner quietly pulled away. When she asked him why, he replied, "I don't think I'm competing with you. I think I'm competing with your past." That's the cost of over-disclosure. It contaminates the now with the then. If you truly want to build something new, leave space for it to be born clean. Not sanitized, not false, but undiluted by unnecessary ghosts. So ask yourself, are you sharing because you trust him or because you haven't yet trusted yourself to move on? Are you building something real or narrating your own ruins? Secret 3. Financial independence details. Have you ever hesitated before sharing how much you earn, what you own, or how well you manage your life? Because somewhere deep inside, you sensed it might shift the dynamic? Have you ever dimmed your light just a little, hoping it wouldn't blind someone who wasn't prepared to respect it? Financial independence is one of the most liberating, hard-won victories a woman can achieve, especially for those who have emerged from dependency, disempowerment, or relational control. And yet it's often one of the most quietly guarded forms of power, not because there's shame in it, but because there's knowledge. Not every man can meet a self-sufficient woman without feeling threatened. This discomfort is not yours to fix. Behavioral science shows that perceived status and control deeply influence relationship dynamics. In traditional conditioning, many men are taught to associate their worth with their ability to provide, protect, and lead. When a woman enters the space already whole, already capable of providing for herself, it disrupts that unconscious narrative. Some will respond with admiration, others with intimidation, and some with attempts to diminish what they cannot dominate. That's why discretion isn't deceit, it's discernment. You do not owe anyone immediate access to your financial reality. Your assets, your retirement accounts, your income, your freedom. These are not relationship entry points. They are personal boundaries. They reflect not just numbers but years of self-overcoming. The jobs you worked when no one helped, the bills you paid in silence, the decisions you made when everything depended on you. To reveal all of that to a man who hasn't yet demonstrated respect for your autonomy is not transparency. It's an emotional gamble. Sigmund Freud would see this moment as more than practical. It's symbolic. Money represents agency. It is a psychic representation of power, survival, even desire. And how you share or guard that power is not just about numbers, it's about self-worth. The unconscious mind equates financial control with relational control. If you hand over one too early, you often risk losing the other. Consider a woman in her early 60s. After surviving a financially abusive marriage, she spent 10 years rebuilding, emotionally and economically. She meets a man who seems kind, but quickly asks if she owns her home, if she plans to retire soon, how much she makes. He frames it as curiosity, but inside she feels a shift. She pauses. She chooses not to answer, not from fear, but from wisdom. Later she realizes that moment was a test, not of honesty, but of power dynamics. To maintain autonomy, practice strategic sharing. Ask yourself, does this person need this information, or do they want it to assess me? Is this a moment of mutual trust, or of subtle evaluation? Financial transparency is important, in time, but it must follow emotional safety and relational maturity, not precede it, because a woman who has built her own foundation deserves to choose who steps onto it. Secret 4. Family conflicts and personal trauma. Have you ever shared something deeply personal about your childhood, your parents, a betrayal you've never fully healed from, and then felt unexpectedly exposed or even dismissed? Have you ever regretted letting someone too soon into the rooms of your past that even you still walk through carefully? There is a profound difference between being open and being prematurely vulnerable, especially when it comes to the pain that shaped you before you had any choice in the matter. Family wounds, childhood neglect, personal traumas. These are not casual stories. They are internal architecture, and not everyone is equipped to walk through them with the care they deserve. When a woman speaks of her family conflicts too early, of a mother who criticized, a father who abandoned, a sibling who stole or abused that left scars, she is not just sharing a memory. She is often unknowingly handing someone the map of her most sensitive psychological terrain. And once that map is in the wrong hands, it can be used to navigate, manipulate, or invalidate. The burden of your history does not need to be laid at a stranger's feet in order to make you real. Freud believed that what is not resolved is repeated. And when you speak too soon of trauma, you may unintentionally re-enter it, hoping this time the listener will respond with love instead of neglect, presence instead of dismissal. But that reenactment rarely heals. It usually reopens. It's important to name this. The desire to tell your story often comes from a deep need to be witnessed, To have someone say, "You didn't deserve that. I see you. I honor your survival." But if that witness hasn't earned your trust, if he has not shown consistency, empathy, or emotional maturity, then what you risk is not healing. It is re-traumatization. One woman, 55 years old, once shared with a man she'd only dated a few times about her brother's addiction, the estrangement from her mother, the therapy she began after a traumatic event in her 20s. She later realized he never asked out of care, only out of curiosity, maybe even control. When she needed empathy, he went silent. When she needed space, he became critical. And in time, she understood. He didn't want to understand her. He wanted to know where she was soft. Your personal history is sacred territory. It should not be offered casually, nor as a way to prove your depth. You are not obligated to explain yourself through the lens of your pain. Emotional intimacy must be earned, not assumed. And part of earning it means giving someone the time to show you that they can hold your truth with dignity, without trying to fix it, define it, or use it. So ask yourself, is this person emotionally mature enough to sit with your story without making it about themselves? Or are you unconsciously hoping that if you open your wounds, they'll finally give you the healing someone else never did? Secret 5. Future expectations and timelines. Have you ever felt the urgency to make things clear? To tell him early on what you want, where this is going, how much time you're willing to invest? Have you ever shared your expectations not because the moment was right, but because you feared being misled again? There's a quiet panic that sets in for many women who have been disappointed, ghosted, or strung along. It whispers, "You need to be upfront. Don't waste time. Ask him what he wants. Tell him what you need. Now." And while clarity is essential in any adult relationship, there's a fine line between expressing your vision and imposing a timeline born of past frustration. Many women carry a deep, unconscious anxiety that says, "If I don't define this now, I'll be hurt later." But often when expectations are presented too early, before emotional depth has developed, they don't create safety, they create pressure. Behavioral psychology shows us that intrinsic motivation is far more powerful than external demands. In simple terms, people move toward what they want to build, not what they feel forced to define. And when a man senses that he's being measured against a predefined plan, especially too soon, his authentic engagement may shrink, not because he lacks interest, but because the space to organically invest has been compromised. Sigmund Freud might frame this urgency as a reaction to past disappointments that remain unresolved. The psyche, in seeking control, tries to preempt pain through structure. "If I know where this is going," it says, "I can avoid another heartbreak." But this logic often backfires, because love does not bloom under interrogation. It flourishes in attunement, presence, and mutual evolution. You are not wrong to desire commitment. You are not wrong to want clarity, devotion, or long-term vision. What sabotages these desires is not the desire itself, but the timing and tone of how they are introduced. Let me tell you a story. A woman in her late 40s, independent and emotionally intelligent, begins dating again after a painful breakup. On the second date, she tells the man, "I'm looking for something serious. I don't have time for anything casual." He nods politely, but later fades away. She wonders, was I too much? But the question is not whether she was too much, but whether she asked for a future before the present had roots. A relationship cannot be forced to grow faster than its emotional soil allows. And when a man is told too soon about your 5-year plan, your timeline for moving in, or your expectations for marriage, he's not responding to you. He's reacting to the architecture of a life he hasn't even stepped into yet. This doesn't mean you should be vague or passive. It means you let the bond grow before placing it under a microscope. Ask yourself, am I sharing this because the connection is ready for this conversation, or because I fear wasting more time? Do I trust the process, or am I trying to outrun past regret? A more empowered stance is this. You observe, you listen, you let the man show you his values through his actions. Then, when mutual trust exists, you co-create direction, not from pressure but from alignment. What if silence isn't withholding? It's wisdom. What if the parts of you that you don't immediately reveal are not secrets, but sovereign spaces? In a world that rewards overexposure, there is something profoundly elegant, almost radical, about a woman who shares herself slowly, intentionally. A woman who understands that not every truth needs to be spoken to be honored, that not all vulnerability is connection, that some things become more powerful when they are protected. Throughout this journey, we've explored 5 sacred areas of discretion: your insecurities, your past relationships, your finances, your personal traumas, and your future plans. And in each, we've touched on one central idea. Selective sharing is not manipulation, it is maturity. It is the difference between offering and performing, between trusting and testing, between connection and self-abandonment. There's a psychological dignity that lives in mystery, not the kind that withholds to play games, but the kind that says, I know who I am, I don't need to reveal everything to feel real. Freud, with his penetrating lens on the human psyche, might say that what is sacred in us is often formed in the unconscious, and it is from that protected space that the most profound forms of strength are born. A woman who chooses what to disclose, when, how, and to whom, is not guarding herself out of fear. She is commanding her narrative. She is no longer performing intimacy for validation. She is living in her own center and inviting others to earn their place inside it. So pause and ask yourself now, what stories have you been telling too soon, too often, to people who didn't deserve them? Where have you confused transparency with trust? And more importantly, where could your silence be your strength? Where could your privacy be your power? This is not a call to isolation. It's a return to emotional sovereignty. It's an invitation to cultivate mystery, not as distance, but as depth. You are not hard to read. You are not too private. You are not difficult. You have simply stopped bleeding in front of those who never learned how to hold a wound. So here is your gentle task. Choose one truth about yourself. Something real, something meaningful, that you usually rush to share. Instead of speaking it, hold it. Sit with it. Let it remain yours for now. Feel what it's like to carry something sacred without needing it to be understood to be valid. Because the woman you're becoming does not fear being misunderstood. She knows that what is precious doesn't need to be proven. It needs to be protected. Your emotional freedom begins where guilt ends, and your deepest respect will come, not when you give everything away, but when you know exactly what is yours to keep. If this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Which of these areas have you struggled to guard? How has selective sharing shifted your relationships or your sense of self? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to continue this path of feminine psychology, emotional clarity, and inner power. We're not just telling stories here. We're rewriting what it means to be a woman who lives from self-knowledge, not emotional exposure. And Freud? He's still watching, still asking, what do you choose to reveal and what does that say about what you're still seeking? Until next time.